Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery and you can see I got a whole bunch of stuff laid out here on the bench. There's a water sprayer, there's 3 buckets. You can see each bucket has a number written onto the side of it. And even here, down within one of the buckets, I've got a camera set up in preparation for something, obviously. But what could that be, pray tell? Yeah, you guessed it. I'm going to be releasing some worms here, and the camera that's kind of suspended there off that clip and off those little extension arms, whatever, is there to film one of 3 worm releases that we're going to do today. And then even after we're done with that, I've got the customary cardboard coverings and even the labels for the containers are ready. I even thought I might lay down a little number into the bin before we drop in the worms so that we know which bin is which. The worms that we're going to be relocating into these nice new containers are the European nightcrawlers, abbreviated as ENC right here on the label that you see in front of us. It's the container of mine which has already completed its horizontal migration of the worms out of the finished compost. So I've already pretty much written this off as a finished tub of castings with all the worms depopulated from it, but they're still kind of coexisting in the same container because those yellow buckets just arrived on the scene here yesterday. I've spent the day creating bedding and prepping them and all that other fun stuff, so at this point it's really just a matter of pulling the trigger and getting our worms released into their new home. So let's get started. Over here, ready for the collection of the worms in the nightcrawler bin. And then it occurred to me, hey, why don't we roll the camera and get a little bit of footage here? All I really did was remove the plastic and newspaper coverings and all these top coverings of paper and cardboard, leaving pretty much the stuff that we want to relocate. And I bought a tray here that I believe should be adequate to fit approximately 1/3 of what's in here, although it is pretty deep. I'm wondering if I might be better off with a deeper tray. And I'm kind of counting on this far edge of the bin over here as being pretty consistently populated, so I'm assuming that the number of worms we pull out of here is going to be about the same as what's in here. So that's my only way of hoping that we end up with 3 containers over there that have about the same number of worms in it, but I guess we'll see if my hunch on that is right. Well, I was looking at this thing and I was thinking to myself, you know, it's pretty big. I mean, just relative to the size of this, you know, it seemed like if I were to use the white container, I'd give myself a little bit of extra room to fit my hand in there alongside the container. But then I also thought to myself, do I have enough room to make the flip over, and the camera's mounted within the yellow bucket, it's going to be in my way, how do I do this? But I think I've got something figured out, and I think I can opt for the bigger and I guess hopefully safer container, in which I've got just a little bit more room in here so I don't get that feeling like I'm going to be overflowing. So I'm not going to hold off here. I'm going to take my chances on my thought up game plan here, and hopefully we get it right on the first take. But basically it starts out with us pulling these little guys out of here and just see if we could do this gracefully without making a huge mess over here. Let's just sort of segment this away from the rest. This is going to have to go with one or the other. We'll just let them have that, I suppose. We'll push over what we want to leave behind. There's other large stuff in here. Here's a piece of leftover banana peel. That's a good little snack to bring along with them, since the container that they're going into is strictly bedding only. Leaves, shredded cardboard, and oh boy, making myself nervous here. All right, let's just go for it. This is where the worms should be. This is the far edge of the bin where the most recent feeding was applied. Any large chunks of bedding, I suppose, we can just leave behind for now, and we'll make use of that at another time. I just don't want to overly clutter what's going over with the worms. I don't mind bringing in some of this bedding that they're occupying right now that they're used to. And also totally on board with stuff like this, maybe like a food scrap that they could just continue to nibble on and feel at home with. But I think all the rest of this stuff away from where the food was should be mostly just surplus bedding. Surplus bedding that they're already very accustomed to, that they've been in for a while now, that they should be pretty comfortable in. And then they'll eventually be able to acclimate and move into the new stuff right below. But I think they'll stay in this for a little while before they start venturing into that pretty much sterile cardboard and newspaper shreds that are in there, and sterile leaves. So let's head over to the bin number 3, which is where we're going to start. That's where the camera was already inserted down into the bin. Let's see if my game plan for releasing these in such a way that I don't make a mess works. At least I'll have 3 tries to perfect my process. So let's get to work and see how it goes. Okay, so we're back over at the yellow tubs, and we're at what I'm calling yellow bucket number 3, for lack of a better name or number. It's the system that the camera was already dangling down within, so the camera's already filming, ready to shoot me, do a no rehearsal attempt of my invented maneuver here. So what I'm doing now is just carefully tipping the entire bucket over. I'm at about a 45-degree angle right now. It might not be clearly visible. My hope is that that permits me to come in here diagonally low enough, oh boy, so that now I can simply tip the tub over without making a huge mess. Alright, very good. And these little guys free in their new home, so I don't want to bother them. I just want to let them get comfortable. So let's just take a quick peek at them before we do, so we can get a sense of how many worms we succeeded in rounding up here. I'm just going to, I think, go with some sort of a really rough estimate of how many worms occupy the bin that we're depopulating right now. I'm going to just go with a number that's something in the neighborhood of maybe 1,200 or something like that, and hope that maybe we've got a good clean 3-way split, and that we can, you know, easily consider this to be about a 400 European nightcrawler worm release. So let's let these little guys get cozy in their new home, and then maybe I'll go fetch the next round of worms so we can start right into the release and filming of the next batch. Alright, well that's about it for the release of the worms into bin number 3. I've already turned off the close-up camera, so we can remove it and get it situated over in the other bin where we're going to do the next release in bucket number 2. And I guess you saw the cardboard coverings that I had tailor-made for this bucket earlier. I just figured I'd put a little piece of newspaper in there too to protect, and I might actually put a little piece of plastic in here too, maybe just a crinkled up shopping bag, just to keep the humidity down low, safe from evaporating out into the dry air in the room here. So let's get things resituated and we can start on bin number 2. Okay, we're back here to round up the worms for release number 2 into bucket number 2. Again, I'm just going to do a quick rough separation of what remains in here to see if I can come up with a pretty even split. Again, me not knowing exactly which of these halves has the greater number of worms in it, I just have to sort of go on a little bit of a assumption that the worms are pretty equally spread out across the edge of the bin. So we'll just bring over the worms as well as all this nice cozy stuff that they were already inhabiting. Not to mention a nice little piece of leftover banana right there, which is also a good thing for them to have. I don't plan on feeding this bin right away. I just want them to sort of get acclimated to the environment and kind of work down the leftover food scraps that were used to lure them out of their old castings. And at some point in the near future, we'll revisit these tubs and give them some feedings. But those feedings will probably be only after a few days. But they'll have plenty here, as you saw. Whole banana peel, whole mango seed, All kinds of good stuff for them to nibble on while they wait for their first feeding in their new home. Okay. Worm batch number 2. Oh, that was simple enough. I just pushed aside bucket number 3 and I brought in bucket number 2. So, same as we did before, in goes the number, signifying which bucket we're working on, and in goes the camera. That's going to shoot some close-up of our worms being released, so let's see if I can be as graceful releasing this batch of worms as I was with the last batch without making a huge mess. Carefully, carefully. Give myself just enough angle so I can slide in here. Whoa. And hopefully tip the container over without making a huge mess. It's funny because from the point of view of this camera that's mounted to the bucket, nothing's changing. The bucket is stationary, its contents are stationary. I guess the lighting should be pretty interesting. Shifting all over the place, so I think we're got the last little guy out. Let's let them get situated, but before we do, let's see if we can size up the number, size up how many worms we succeeded in rounding up over here. I'm not sure where the concentration of worms is, where that group is that was along that edge of the bin back there, but let's leave them be. Oop, and let them get cozy in their new space. Alright, it would appear that the worms have made themselves at home. So we'll shut off this close-up camera, drop in the coverings, and we can proceed to our final release. And as luck would have it, bucket number 2 just happens to get a piece of cardboard that has a coincidental number 2 looking scribble mark on it, so how convenient is that? Okay, onward. Let's get the last of these worms released into bucket number 1. Alright, and that leads us to the final group of worms remaining to be extracted from this mission, from this tub that they did such a great job on. This is where I'm expecting to see the most worms, so I just want to make sure before I get too confident in our job that we've got a good number of worms in here. But you know, I guess there's no easy way to tell. There would have been no easy way for me to ensure that the worms line up against that edge of the bin in a consistent fashion where I could just subdivide it evenly and assume that we've got an equal number of worms in each segment. Well, I guess we'll just have to see, you know, how each bucket performs. We'll probably manage them and maintain them in a very equal way in terms of portions given and everything like that. So if one bin kind of excels or lags behind the others, then we'll be able to infer that that container has either fewer or a greater number of worms living in it. So I think that brings the close of this system to an official end, or the close is coming to an end. I don't even know. The end of this bin, I think, is now official now that we've actually removed the worms from it. But I believe that the next step for this pile of castings here is to kind of foster it, you know? See if we can round up some babies out of there, because all the cocoons that these guys left behind, I bet you in a couple weeks we might start seeing a little bit more worm activity again kicking up in there. So I'll be keeping an eye on this bin going forward. It won't be used as compost quite yet to feed plants. So let's head back over to bin number 1 and get these little guys situated in their new home. Okay, so one last time, I've already got the little number 1 label down there on top of which we're going to dump in the worms. So I just got to get this camera oriented for a good image. These buckets are all the same, so they should clip in very similarly, but this one I don't seem to have gotten a common grip on, but I think I'm in place now for a good close-up. Let's go ahead and do our little tipping over diagonal release of the worms trick, hopefully without making a miss. a miss or a mess. It would be pretty easy to miss if I'm not paying attention, but it looks like we're in for another pretty smooth worm release here. Once again, we're just going to spread out the worms a little bit so we could better see how many we've got here, or just try to get a slightly better view of how many we've got here, and then we'll just leave them be, let them get cozy in their new space. There's some leftover stuff for them to play with. Okay, very cool. I don't feel like I even have to knock on wood at this point, because it is pretty much a done deal. We've got ourselves 3 new bins made out of a single bin that just ended, and you know, there's a bunch of stuff to be done around here, like fixing my little labels onto each container. There's still the other container in which we've got the castings that needs to be covered up and tended to. I got some clerical work to do on my spreadsheet to account for all these extra containers in my systems now, and blah blah blah, but all that's boring. I'm not going to keep you around for that. Really quick though, before I go, let me just say thank you. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate your company. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's really appreciated as well. All right, everyone, thanks for watching. Have a great day. Take care.